my name is Surya Sachin. I have 1 year of experience in coding tutor as a Python developer. Today I'm going to explain about exception handling. So exception handling is nothing but an error handling. So there are three types of blocks in exception handling: try block, except block, and finally block. I'm going to explain in detail further. So here I wrote the print statement, basic try except. Then I take a variable as x and I give the value 10. I'm going to print the x value, and in try block, so try block is nothing but trying the code, where we're going to try the code. If there is an error, it's going to stop executing this code. So I have written the x is equal to 10 divided by 0, so which is not going to print because 10 cannot be divisible by 0. So I wrote an except block over here. This is 0 division error, and I gave alias as e. In this block I have printed the caught 0 division error and e. So let's see by executing this code. So before executing, I'm going to explain what is except block. Except block is nothing but it's going to catch an error. If we write a code in try block, if there is an error, then it's directly send it to the except block without executing the try block. And try block nothing but we're just going to write a code, so that we are writing the try block code to try a code whether there is an error or not. Let me execute the code. So as you can see over here, try block cannot be executed because there is an error. 10 divided by 0 cannot be divisible. So it directly jumped into an except block and printed the statement caught 0 division, as you can see in the output over here. And since we gave an alias as e, even e is going to print division by 0, as you can see here. So this is the first error method, where I'm going to call it as basic try except. I have one more thing over here. Let me comment this one. So second method is going to be a multiple except blocks. So where we're going to write in multiple except statements. So we have printed in statement as multiple except blocks, and we wrote the try block as I told before. Here even we're writing the same code, where we're going to divisible a 10 by 0. So in this block I gave a value as a variable, and I gave int as abc. So what we're going to do is, here we're converting a string abc into an integer, which is not even possible to us. And again I gave the variable here x is equal to 10 plus 10. Here I gave the integer value 10 and string value 10. So this value is possible because if we concatenate integer plus string, it's not going to concatenate completely. And I have gave the except block over here. Again I kept the 0 division error, and I'm printing this won't run here, and I gave multiple except blocks, as you can see. So let's see by executing this code for better understanding. Comment this one. Let's run it again. A new terminal. Yeah, as you can see, try block will not execute when there is an error. and it's going to skip the try block and go into the exception block over here, and it's going to print only the first statement. This won't run here, and it's not going to print this all one because except block only allows to run this the first one as we shown here. So let's go to the next method by commenting this. So next method is going to be catch all exceptions. Exceptions are nothing but an errors. So as usual, I printed the statement as catch all exceptions, and try block I have written, and I give the result is equal to 10 divided by 2 minus 2. Obviously this is not going to run because a number cannot be divisible by 0. It's going to show you an error in our output. So we wrote here an except block. So let's see whether this will work or not. So it clearly shows that chord general exception divisible by 0. It's just a simple. Let's go to the fourth method. Uncomment, open. Fourth one is going to be using else block. We are going to use an else block in the try and except blocks. In try block, I used num as a variable and kept and gave it value as 2. And here I took the res as a result as a variable and gave a values 10 divided by num, which is going to divisible by 10 divided by 2. So it is going to print in try block over here, and even I have given except block and I'm printing the division failed except block over here. If it's failed in try block, it's going to print this message, but it's not going to fail because 10 is divisible by 2. And here I have given an else block. In else block, I'm printing a statement as division succeed, and result also I'm printing. The result is going to be 10 divided by 2, and else block. That's it. It runs if there is no error in the statement. This else block is going to run if there is no error. It's going to print a try block, and so that it's going to print an else statement. If this try block works out, else statement is going to print instead of an except block. So here I wrote a finally block. So let's talk about finally block. Finally block is nothing but it's going to execute no matter what, whether there is an error or there is not an error in our code. It's going to execute no matter what. So exception handling we use mainly to execute the code even there is an error. This is the main purpose of the exception handling basically, because try and except both are little bit similar to if and else statements. Even here I wrote a try block. In try block I have used a while loop. By using true you can execute a while loop. I gave a variable as x and gave a value as 10. So it's going to be an infinite loop, and I have used a finally block over here, and it's going to print in finally. So finally block will not always execute our statements. There are few times it's going to fail when there is an infinite loop. If there is an infinite loop, finally block will fail. So remember, this concept is really important. As you can see here, I have run the code, and As I told before, it's going to execute an else statement because try block is succeed. It's going to run without an error. So else block is going to print as division succeed and result as we given the result is equal to 10 divided by num. So result is going to print, and else block is also printed in our output over here where we can see. And if I were to tell about finally block, where we run here, finally block is also going to execute because no matter what, if there is an error or no error, finally block is going to print. So it's also printed in our output as you can see, but here it didn't print anything. Do you know why? Because it's an infinite loop, there's nothing to print and there's nothing to catch an error over here. It's executed, and finally block is not going to print because during an infinite loop final block is not going to print. So this is the fourth method. So using finally block is the next method which I'm going to explain. As I told before, final block will be executed whether there is an error or not. Here I'm going to open a file. F is equal to open, nothing but a file, and I gave a sample text over here which is going to read the file. Here f dot write, I'm going to write and say hello. That means we can write our code in exception even through file handling. We can experiment different methods. Let me run this code. So here we can see the traceback error because there is no such file directly. I didn't save a file actually. So if we saved a file, it's going to print this file over here. And f dot close always executes. Sorry, didn't add a file over here, so it's going to show a traceback error. Let's go to the next code. In next code, we're going to do try except else finally together at a time. Let me uncomment this one. First, we're going to print this statement, and in try block, we're going to do the same thing, 10 divided by 2. And in except block, we're going to print cannot divided by 0. And here, what we're going to do is we are going to execute all the blocks in the same code, try except else and finally together. I already told this one before, but let me revise this one more time. So there will be no error in try block. So except block is not going to execute. Else one is going to execute because try block has no error, and finally block will execute no matter what. Let me try. As I told here, try block executed and jumped to else block without executing an except block over here and printed no exception result. RES is nothing but a result. This is going to print 10 divided by 2. The same thing came into the output over here, and finally block is going to print as I told before. The next method is going to be raise an exception manually. If we want to raise an exception manually, in some cases we need to raise an exception manually. So to raise an exception manually, we are going to use a method called raise. By using this statement, we can raise an exception whether the reason statement is right or wrong. By entering this statement, we are going to raise an exception. I gave a string as some other name over here, and I gave an age as a variable -5, and if age is greater than 0, raise an exception called age cannot be negative. And here I have given the multiple except blocks. I have printed. Let me run this code for a better understanding. So as I told before, it's going to raise an exception by entering to the raise statement, and it printed manually. Okay, let me comment this one. And coming to the eighth method of an exception handling. So custom exception class is nothing but we're going to use a class method in a try block or except block, and we can use functions in this block. We can use any type of code in exception handling. It is nothing to identify just whether there is an error or not. I gave a class, and here I gave a class name as exception, and this class name I gave a string called custom exception for insufficient funds, and I'm going to pass this one. Sorry. So pass is nothing but no matter, it's just going to skip the statement. So that's why we're going to use a pass. And I have used a function def, defining a function name with withdraw, and here I have given attributes balance and amount. If amount is greater than balance, we have to raise an exception, and it's going to print not enough balance. And I'm returning the balance minus amount to the function over here, to attributes. Then I'm going to use a try block. In try block, I used a new balance as a variable. Then with withdraw, I give the parameters or attributes, we can say, as 100, 150. Then I use an except block as printing custom exception code, as I gave an alias as e. So let me print this block for the custom exception class. It's going to show not enough balance. Reason why? Because here we have raised an exception, so it's going to go to the function and execute this one, and once it's executed by this one, it's not going to take the try block at all, so it's going to print the statement. Ninth method is going to be a nested try block. Here I'm going to use nested try block. As you can see here, we can use, it's nothing but keeping try block inside a try block. I have used a num as a variable integer. Here I'm going to turn an ABC as a string to integer, which is not possible. So it's going to print an exception. It's going to raise an exception. Inner caught value error. Then again it's going to raise an exception, outer caught exception. Let me show by running this code. As I told, it's going to print inner caught value error and outer caught exception. And as we took alias as e, it's going to print these statements. And it's just simple. And coming to the 10th method is using asset. Even this was the same thing as before, as we done. It's going to, if if there is an error, it's going to print an exception block. If there is no error, it's going to print a try block. It was same as before, so no need to go so detailedly in this concept, I believe. And handling multiple exception in one block, so we can also handle multiple exception in just a one block. Like, let me print and then explain. Here I have to call one try block and one except block, but I have wrote two errors in a try block, value error and zero division error, and I printed both value error and zero division error, and I'm going to print an exception as E, where you can see over here it already got. That's it. And coming to the last and final method of our code, exception with finally cleanup. So it's nothing, no matter, as I told before, no matter what, finally block is going to execute the code. As I told, finally block is going to execute once it's became true or false. Try block is nothing but true, whether if there is no exception, try block is going to print. If there is an exception, except block is going to print. And here there is an exception because file may not exist. I didn't give any file, so it's going to fail. So it going to except block and going to print caught file not found error, and then finally block is going to execute, because if there is an error, it's going to execute. Yeah, thank you. So finally what I'm going to conclude is there is three blocks of code: try, except, and finally. So try block is going to try a code whether there is an error or not. It's going to check whether there is an error or not. If there is an error, then except block is going to execute, because on the name itself it is there, except, which is nothing but exception, except nothing but error. So it's going to catch an error if try block has been failed. It's just like an if and else block, it's almost similar to that. And finally block is nothing but it's going to execute whether there is an error or not. No matter what, if there is an error or not, finally block is not going to execute. But it doesn't mean finally block is always going to execute. In some cases it's going to fail. As I shown an example, while loop, infinite while loop, while processing an infinite while loop, finally block is going to fail. So the main use of exception handling is just an identify the errors and execute the errors whether they are wrong or right. And in this way we are going to handle an exceptions. Thank you for having a valuable time.